morning, everyone. I think it's an evening in Ethiopia. So this is my first actually program which is going to be conducted using English. So for the next an hour or two, I'll be torturing myself with English. That is in honor of my beloved guest, Dr. Miriam Parker. And our discussion will be entirely in English for this particular session. Maybe in between or at the end of the session, I may put some remarks in Amharic for Ethiopian candidates. So today's program is going to be about U.S. residency matching and the process and multiple questions which might be raised by candidates surrounding that process. So I will, before I go into further details, I will introduce you my respected guest, Dr. Miriam Parker. Dr. Miriam Parker currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She has been an internal medicine doctor for the past 27 years. She has been board certified internist, and she has been working as a program director for more than 25 years at Atlanta Medical Center in Atlanta, Georgia. And currently she is a student and interview career coach. She has a vast experience working with international medical graduates, because I know firsthand about this, because I once was a candidate who visited her center. I interviewed with her, but I chose some other program for some other reason, personal reason, and I didn't end up matching in Atlanta Medical Center. Most of my colleagues, my best friends, have got the opportunity and the privilege to work and train with Dr. Miriam Parker. She is highly regarded by all the candidates I know and everybody in that center for good reason, though, because she's very supportive and she really believes in the international medical graduates and what we offer, what we could potentially offer to the U.S. healthcare system. She has given an opportunity to IMGs more than any other person, especially for Ethiopians. So I really appreciate her effort to support international medical graduates, because, like, she's out of office right now, but she has continued what she has been doing for the past 25 years. So without further ado, I will introduce you, Dr. Miriam Parker. I'll give her the opportunity to go further and say a little bit about herself. Thank you so much, Dr. Parker, for being my guest. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's an honor to be here today to talk to all of you. And I would just say that, my heart is with you. I started many years ago, probably 5 years or so into working as a program director, maybe a little bit less. I had a few Ethiopians that had been in the program, one that became one of my chief residents, and then that sort of started a cascade of having really many excellent Ethiopian residents in my program over the years. I think typically we had 30 to 40% of the class were Ethiopians. The 1 year that we got to 70% Ethiopians, they actually told me they were going to put a flag up on the top of the hospital with the Ethiopian flag. So, but anyway, I just say that to let you know that I'm very committed to helping all of you to enhance your applications, to enhance your chances of matching. That's really why I'm here. And not just for Ethiopians, for everyone, but I can really truly say that I have a special place in my heart for you. It doesn't hurt that my brother-in-law is Ethiopian, so that is another little bit of a twist to this. But anyway, I'm here today to sort of give you some broad ideas about the application process that I think are really important. These are my thoughts about how you can enhance your application. There may be others who actually share somewhat different approaches to this, but I will give you what I think really works and what I've seen over the time after having really looked at thousands of applications, what really I believe are the key features that you should consider in the application process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. So when I thought about having this conversation with you, I was thinking about it because about 6 years ago when I was in the application process, most of the information I gathered was mainly from best friends and things like that. So if you are fortunate enough to get somebody who can guide you in the right direction, you will be successful. But like, if you are not fortunate enough to get somebody who can guide you in the right direction, you are lost, because like, it requires a lot of understanding before you enter into this application process. And I believe you are the right person to talk about these issues, because 25 years of experience being a program director, you have dealt with a lot of application, because I know one single center may receive about 3,400, 3,000, 4,000 applications a year. And it really requires a lot of experience to pick 9 out of those 4,000, 3,000 applicants. So I am honored to have you here, just in my own name, and also just for the people who are watching this program. Like you said, the services we offer are not limited to Ethiopians, it's for everybody. And I do have some followers on LinkedIn, so they can utilize whatever information is going to be shared with them on this particular session. So I will proceed to the first question for you. So what is a new, I mean, like, what is new for National Resident Matching Program, or this NRMP in abbreviation? So what is new? What things should candidates really realize before entering into this application process for 2025?
So, every year when I work with candidates, I would probably tell you that about 80% of the candidates, regardless of where they're from, actually don't utilize the information that's available on the NRMP website, which, I'll ask them, have you looked at the match reports? Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? They look at me blankly, like they have no idea what I'm talking about. So this year, and actually it was within the last 4 or 5 days, the NRMP website has been revamped in such a way as to provide you with really more robust data about the match, and even this year for the first time about the outcomes of the SOAP, the supplemental program that you may or may not know about, and we won't talk about here today. But there is much more information. There's even additional information on that site for IMGs, specifically information for non-US IMGs. So that would be my first comment, is become familiar with what's available to you. It's under match reports, and you just go there and start looking. The second thing is the NRMP this year has created a program match directory. Now, there are other directories. There's the AMA FRIDA directory that some of you may be familiar with. And then there are all these private directories that you have to pay to get information. This is free. It's over 6,000 programs. With the ones that I looked at, there was links in each case to the actual program. And so it is a resource for you that I think will streamline your evaluation of different programs, deciding where to apply, etc. And again, a resource that is brand new, probably has some kinks in it because it's brand new, but I would urge you to take a look at it and see how you can use that to your advantage, especially when you are in the process, which you will be soon, if not already, of selecting programs that you're going to apply to. The other thing I would tell you about the NRMP, just let me say a few things, if you don't mind, about the data that we have now from last year, so that it's kind of a very, very, very broad overview. And that is, if you looked at the data from last year, there was more individuals who applied through the NRMP than ever before. There was about a 4.4% increase in the number of applications. There was a 2.2% of that 4.1 was actually because of because of IMGs. So that there was a much larger percentage of IMGs. The IMG number went up by about 2,000 applicants. And so it's good and it's bad. It meant that actually there were more positions that were granted for IMGs because there were more positions offered. There wasn't just a 4.4% increase in the number of applicants. There was also an increase, not to the same extent, but there was an increase in the number of positions overall that was added last year, because in the United States, we're in the process of building more medical schools, building more programs to try to fill our gaps for physicians in this country. Because I don't know if you know, but it's projected in the United States that we have 100,000 physician shortage here. So the country is trying to get more and more physicians. In any event, there were more positions available, but because of the fact that there were more IMGs that applied. It was a little bit more competitive this year for IMGs. So you were competing against each other. So just another reason why your applications have to be better than other people that are applying as IMGs. It's just that simple. So those are the comments I'm making. And again, this year, the match rate overall for IMGs was about 58.5%. It was down a little bit from last year just because of the reasons that I gave. The specialties that were still the top specialties in terms of the percentage of IMGs that filled in those specialties, number one was medicine. And then we followed that with pathology, neurology, pediatrics, psychiatry, family medicine. Those were the specialties that filled with the most percentage of IMGs. So that's just a little bit of an overview, very, very, very broad to get us started.
These are very important and valid points, by the way, because like, in the past, people were supposed to be coming here to take CS examination, the clinical skill examination, and they would also be required to be in the US to interview, right? So if people do not get the opportunity to get a visa to come and interview, then the number of IMGs who would be competing would be lesser. But after the pandemic, everything has changed. So right now, people are not supposed to be taking CS examination. Plus, they are not also required to be physically present in the US to do interviews. So because of that, you can be in New Delhi and you can just interview for 10, 15 interviews, whatever you got fortunate to get with. And you can be in Addis or in Mombasa or somewhere else in the world, and you can interview. So that actually increased the competition amongst IMGs. So we have to be mindful of that. So that is the main reason why we are here today. So you have to understand the process and you have to work hard to stand out. So I will come next. The next question to you is going to be, what is new in the ERAS application? So for those of you who are not familiar what ERAS, the abbreviation means, it means Electronic Residency Application Service, nothing else. So what is new in the ERAS application? Because 6 years ago when I applied, the platform was completely different. The composition, the experiences you put in, there was no limit. You can put number of experiences, like a work experience, be it volunteer experience, research experience, whatever you have, you can put it in there. There was no word limit. There was word limit in describing it, but there was no limit into the number of experiences you would share. And they wouldn't ask you which one is meaningful to you and all that. So what is new in ERAS application compared to 2024, and something which we should be mindful about?
So for 2025, there was actually some real intentional looking at the application to see what they could do to improve it. And some of the things that they changed aren't going to really stand out to you. There is a new section on honors and awards so that those stand out. It was always difficult in the past for people to really understand where to put those things. And so, start getting that list together of any kind of honors and awards you've gotten, because you need to get that into that section, because that is an important section. They have a special section now for hobbies and interests. They've sort of taken that out of experiences, and you have a special section for that. The publications, it was a minor thing, but they changed the way that they wanted you to report the citations. You can report in different styles, and it had used to be the APA style, and now it's the AMA style, but it is actually important because you need to cite your references properly. The other issue was they changed a little bit how you described your fluency in a language. They didn't give you all sorts of options. It was either sort of fluent or not, especially in regards to English. And then I can tell you, you still have the 10 experiences and the 3 meaningful ones that was seen last year. But, if you had applied sometime in the past, as was just mentioned, you might remember a time where you could put in many, many experiences. And I think in part, there was a backlash. the U.S. Medical students often, as you probably know, they go directly from college to medical school, and then they apply for residency. And many of them do not have, jobs or many volunteer experiences, or it's a sort of different candidacy in a sense. They're not as I don't want to say it this way, but they don't have the same maturity of experience as many of you do. And they said, well, hey, these foreign medical graduates, IMGs, they have 20 experiences. We're having a hard time coming up with 10. So I don't know if that was what actually was the impetus behind shortening that section, or maybe people just were getting tired of reading 20 meaningful, 20 experiences, probably a combination of both. But it does focus you. It focuses you, those 10 meaningful experience, or those 10 experiences, on really figuring out why you're going to pick the experiences that you do. Okay, it's not just a random thing. You really need to think about that. And we may talk about that a little bit later. But so 10 meaningful, and then three the three meaningful ones out of those 10 experiences, again, which takes some consideration. The program signaling and the geographic signaling are not new. They were there last year, but for at least some programs, the number of program signals and the way that the program signals are organized is different. For instance, last year you had 7 signals for internal medicine, and they were just all equivalent. This year you have 12, and you have 3 that are gold signals, and you have, the rest that are silver signals or whatever. So I call them the love letters and the I like you letters. So those are differences, and you need to pay attention to those things.
I like the expression of the love letter versus the I like you. I mean, it's going to be tough because if you signal one program that gold signal and somebody gets the ordinary signaling, it really means a lot, because you are just expressing your interest about a certain program, only one program or 3 out of 12, and the rest, because as an IMG, I remember applying to more than 100 programs. What about the rest? You are literally wasting your money, because it's adding a program into your list is just adding another expense, because by certain dollars, I don't remember exactly how much you pay after you apply a certain number of applications, programs, after you have applied to a certain number of programs. So we have to be mindful of that as well. And it's challenging. I don't know. It's becoming more tough, I guess, but you are the expert, and you will help us understand how to deal with those kind of things. So let me just
interrupt for a second, just make 2 comments. Listen, I know that this process is incredibly expensive for all of you, but for whatever it means, they did this year, I forgot to mention this, they did revise the payment schedule this year, that makes it considerably, it's about 30% cheaper, or 30% less expensive, I guess I should say, which may not help that much in this whole process where you guys are having to have life savings to do this, but it is a little cheaper. The other comment I would make that's kind of interesting is part of the other impetus besides the signals was what you mentioned before. As a program director, I used to get 4,000 applications for 10 spots, and I would interview about 60 people. And so, that's often the ratio, about 10, it's usually about 10 applications for every 1 spot, or something greater than that. And so the program signals and the geographic signals were supposed to help program directors really cut down on ensuring that they interview people that they think are more likely to come to their program. And they thought maybe by doing that as well, it would cut down to some extent on the number of applications per person. And it did to some extent, not to a great extent, but it did. So those are just 2 more comments.
That's an interesting point, actually, because it makes the life of the program director much easier in selecting those highly potentially possible candidates who can end up matching with them. Mm-hmm. Instead of fiddling around 3,000, 4,000 applications and trying to pick those 60 lucky ones, you know what I mean? But from the candidate perspective, I think it's becoming more harder, because you tied up at somewhere, So the rest of the programs, they think, okay, this guy is less likely to come to me. Then, like, just because of the first remark you make, it becomes the applicant's life, the applicant's life becomes a little bit harder. But anyway, we'll talk about further on how to stand up. So my next question is that, how does an international medical graduate stand out compared to the US graduates, as well as compared to other IMGs coming from somewhere else? Because, like, particularly I am more focused on Ethiopian candidates right now. But there are many people coming from India, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran. These countries are very famous, and from Africa, Nigeria, and other places. And I saw in the application, even, like, in terms of ethnicity, only few countries from Africa are mentioned. And one of them is Ethiopia. I'm proud of that, by the way. That means, like, the US healthcare system has recognized Ethiopian doctors are one of the most coming and practicing to the US, which is a privilege. So most of you have worked hard to get that spot to your country, so feel proud. So how does a candidate stand out amongst the 4,000, 5,000, or 10,000 IMGs who are applying every year? If you can address that.
So the first thing that I really would say about it is everything matters. Everything about your application matters. I think about it this way. Many of you, you ended up going, you were in high school, you took these exams, and you ended up getting into medical school and really showing your academic prowess to be able to do that. And then you went to medical school, and then after it, some of you did residency, some of you did general, medical officer stuff, some, close to the capital city, far away from the capital city, had other kinds of jobs, had other experiences. Some of you, I understand, are more fresh graduates. But you really have a wealth of experience. And you've taken a lot of time. If you look at the time that journey so far has taken you, it's been many years. And then probably more years that you add on to that to get your USMLEs done, sometimes just the amount of time I know to work and to try to save money and to do all these things. So it's a really long period of time that you have taken and that you've devoted to being a doctor, and then deciding that you're going to try to come to the United States and have a residency there. And if you look at the time frame like this, and you look at the time about your application, it's a very, very small slice of the time you've spent. But that small slice that you're completing your application, getting your personal statement, trying to work to get the best letters of recommendation you have, that small slice is representative of everything that came before. And so not to take the necessary time and the care on all of those things related to your application, I just say to you, you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice, and you're dishonoring, really, all the hard work that you've done. So if you think about it that way, I hope that will help you to say, this is something that I need to, I need to handle like I would a child and to nurture it and to bring it up and to work on this application, and not just say, okay, today I'm going to complete my application and I'm going to get all these experiences done, and tomorrow I'm going to work on my personal statement, and and it's good enough. Because you can't have that attitude. You have to have the attitude that you are going to hone that application to the best of your abilities. It is going to represent you when you push the button and send it. It's going to represent you to the best of your abilities. So that would be my first comment, that everything in that application matters. And the other major comment that I would say, and the most recent talks that I've been giving, I've been talking a lot about this, and that is professionalism. And, I think most of the time when we think about professionalism, people think, about showing up on time and being punctual and, dressing nicely and being respectful. I mean, I think if you asked many people about professionalism, they would give you some of those aspects of professionalism. But professionalism, especially when you think about it in terms of being a physician, is so much broader than that. And it has so many components in it. And ensuring that you that your application, whether it's the actual ERIS application or your personal statement or your letters of recommendation or how you present yourself in an interview, making sure that concepts of professionalism and evidence of overt professionalism are present in all of those parts of your application, to me, is really, really paramount. So, when you think about professionalism, it's not just those other things that I talked to you about, but it's demonstrating that you actually have a service commitment to people and that you put the care of the patients above you. Okay. That you demonstrate that you have resilience, which every single one of you does, and that you're adaptable, that you demonstrate your ability and your understanding of the importance of collaborative activities and teamwork and with your peers, that you understand the importance in those collaborative efforts of being able to receive feedback and to have a give and take, and that you don't have this hubris about you that you know everything, but that you recognize that you can learn from anybody on the team. I can learn from the janitor. So you have to have that in the application, and then many, many other features, your ethics, that you have, I think that's one of the things about the professions that you have an ethical duty to, to certain principles of justice and autonomy for your patients, for ensuring, that you do the right things and that you don't do the things that could harm people, and not just your patients, but your peers, your colleagues, your students, all of those things. So permeating those kinds of professionalism tenets, throughout your application, to me, becomes paramount. And it is not something that many people think about. And it is, and it has to be intentional. It has to be intentional. So I would tell you that too, when you look at applications, and this was sort of mentioned, program directors are looking for the candidates that are best for their programs. Okay. There is this concept of holistic review where, you don't just look at a person's scores in their year of graduation, but you look at the person as an individual. But, the bottom line is, initially there is there's a funnel, and you have to meet certain characteristics before you get to the next part. But when you get into the funnel and you pass certain criteria, then you have to sort of prove to the program director that you're worth an interview, that they should interview you. And showing evidence of how you align with their program becomes really important. They want to pick people who are going to be successful in their program. They really do. And when we know from program directors, and listen, we know from program directors surveys, and this is all specialties across the board. We know from program director surveys from the NRMP, a survey that was done about 4 years ago, when program directors were asked, what is the single, or name the most important competencies, in a sense, that you think are going to ensure the success of a resident in your program, you know what the number one was? Professionalism. And, I saw that as a program director. You could take somebody who wasn't that smart, but showed up, was there early, saw all the patients, wrote all the notes, was able to, accept feedback, actually solicited feedback, worked beautifully in groups, made sure that every day they came in with their white coat pressed. That person was going to be successful. And I could have somebody who was, a brain, who had, some fantastic score on their application and wasn't humble, didn't have these characteristics, and they were going to be a problem for me. They were going to be a problem for me for 3 years.
So back home, when I was in Department of Surgery as a professor, I used to tell people I don't care whether you are a gold medalist or not. So you have the gold medal and you are wearing it, you are coming with it to the hospital, but you are the worst in terms of attitude. If you are the worst, the unkindest person on earth to your patients, you are going to be a misery to many. So nobody wants you to be next to them. You know what I mean? But just like you said, somebody who is average, somebody who is dedicated, somebody who is always trying to change and grow in the process, that is a person you'd like to have in your team. It doesn't matter, because like you can make them successful. And that actually to me is the quality of a good mentor. A good mentor is someone for me who works hard with people with average capacity to make them successful, not somebody who works with a gold medalist and contribute literally nothing, because those people do not have any challenge in terms of academic achievements and all that. So I think our audiences are taking notes, and the words Dr. Miriam Parker was stating earlier are very key and important terminologies which you have to incorporate into your application, be it in the body of the main application or in your personal statement. Those attributes, those terminologies, words have to be included, because maybe some programs might flag you because you have included those terminologies in your application. So you can say something about it, because now, program directors are employing AIs and all that to select those lucky candidates who would be deserving an interview out of 4,000, 5,000 applications. So you have to be really mindful. So just don't consider this talk or conversation we are having right now as an ordinary conversation. Believe me, it's going to help you a lot. So stay tuned with us until the end of this program. And if you can share whatever, the link of our discussion for today in your network, that would be very helpful. I see a lot of people right now, but we need more people to listen to it. But the good thing is this is going to be recorded. It will be there. So it's going to serve generations, like not only 2025 applicants. You can always, that's what I do. When people ask me questions, I just forward links so that they can see it and enjoy the conversation and take notes, actually. So my next question is, what kind of work experience, volunteer experience, and research experiences should be included? Like you said, I worked for 12 years. So when I applied, I had 12 years of experience. So I had a lot of volunteer activities, I had a lot of research activities, and I had a lot of work experience. So it was really difficult. Like for somebody like me, it's going to be very difficult to pick from those different activities spanning 12 years. Some people might say 16 years of experience, even longer than that, or like 8 years, 5 years, 6 years, you name it. Sometimes it may be very difficult to select those very important ones out of the vast experience you have. So what are the most important considerations a candidate should look into to pick the most important work, the most important research, and the most important volunteer experiences to include as part of their application? If you can say something about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's clearly a challenge for a lot of people. And they'll ask me, which should I include? And I say, well, I can't, that's really not my job. I can give you some thoughts about it. The first thing I would just say is ask yourself, when you put down this whole list, of what did this experience mean to me? What did it mean to me? How did I grow from this experience? How did I contribute? How does it showcase my professionalism, or one aspect of it? How does it show my cultural humility? How does it show my resilience? How does it show what kind of a team leader I am? Look for things in those experiences that show the richness of your experience. Because a lot of what times people will do is they just pick, in the ERIS application, in that experience section, there's a drop-down screen that says key characteristics. And those key characteristics are some of the things I just mentioned. Does this show empathy and compassion? Does this show resilience and adaptability? Does this show cultural humility? Does this show, ethical responsibility? They're I don't know, I think it's about 10 different categories that you can select from. And what I find sometimes, which is really the most amazing thing, is I think people go about it backwards. They select the experience, and then they select one of these key characteristics. And when I actually read the experience and look at the key characteristics, there isn't really even a relationship, or if there is, they haven't made clear to me what that relationship is. So it looks very disjointed. So I would say put down the list of all your experiences and then actually look look at the ARIS drop-down screen, have that in front of you, and figure out which one of those experiences is going to best exemplify cultural, humility or compassion. Don't force it. It has to be authentic. I mean, you can't make it work, and you're not going to have every single category on your application. It's not about that, but it is about having some variety there and showcasing your completeness as an individual, the richness. So that's what I would say. Don't go about it the way I think 99% of people do. They get the experience and then they go, how am I going to characterize that? No, do it backwards. And I think you'll be much more successful. The other comment is that when people put down their experiences on that application, they usually put bulleted points. They put, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. You know what? That's really not what an experience is. I mean, yes, in large measure, an experience is about you did things within that experience, but what was the experience of it? It wasn't just seeing patients and doing H&Ps or whatever. It was something more, and that has to tie back to the key characteristic. So think about that, and I think you actually will differentiate your applications immediately when you do that, because 90% of the applications I get are simply bulleted lists of what they did for a given thing. Very boring to read. Have you ever studied for an exam, like some of these study aids that they have where they just list, a disease and then they list bullets? And to me, I mean, maybe I'm old-fashioned, old school, but it never meant anything to me. Nothing was tied together for me. It was just a series of maybe even seemingly unrelated facts. I much preferred to read a short, well-written paragraph that tried to help me pull it together. So unless you're one of these people who can, likes those bulleted lists, realize most people don't like them. They don't tell me much about you, and I don't even bother reading them when I see them. And actually, in the ARIS application, they tell you not to do it. They say not to do that. And still, it's sort of like not looking at the instructions, too, of the application. It blows my mind that people can actually see instructions and then decide that they're trying to help you in those instructions. And then people seemingly, they just jettison the instructions and they say, I'm going to do it my way.
The problem is I have to admit something. So, I mean, when we joined medical school, we have to go through a certain process, right, back home. So we take this certifying examination by the end of 12th grade. If you score 4 or 3.8, you go to medical school. And if you want it, you go to medical school. There is no application field. There is no personal statement written. There is no interview process. What get you into the medical school was your highest score, all A's in all courses you have taken and things like that. So we lack experience in terms of applications, even residency, because I work in a teaching institution. Even for residency, we give them written entrance examination. Those candidates who scored higher will be maybe if we have 10 spots, maybe 20 of them would qualify out of 100 applicants based on their written examination. Then we call them for an interview, and the interview doesn't have well-structured, organized kind of formats. Sometimes there could be some subjective component. So people lack experience. I can really confidently talk, including myself as an IMG, as an Ethiopian graduate. We did lack an experience in terms of the application process. So we don't even we don't even care about whatever instructions is given. They have already given you a guidance, you ignore it, and then you face the consequence, you know what I mean? So like you said, bullet point, it doesn't mean anything because you have to describe the process. Why is that meaningful? You have to say something, beautiful words, beautiful key terminologies has to be indicated. That stands out. So this is a very valid information. So those of you who are applying, those of you who have already just started working on your application, you have to be mindful of this important comment. So about the geographic signaling and things like that, you already talked about it. I'm going to pass that particular question. And in the future, when the application submission nears, we will have another session where we can entirely focus on how to do program signaling, what criteria to look into, because these geographic regions are categorized in terms of states. Certain states are categorized in one category, other states in another category. So you may want to stay in New York, but like, New York will be grouped with other New Hampshire, Massachusetts, blah, blah, where you don't want to go. And like, California would be grouped with some other states where you don't want to go. So especially if there is like, family commitment and other preferences, so it becomes difficult. So that by itself will be an important discussion topic for one entire session, and I'll keep it for some other time. So I will pass to the most important component of this discussion, which is personal statement. So I have never written a personal statement. The first time I did write a personal statement was for my ERAS application. So sometimes we have to be really true to ourselves. So most of our images, I believe I can talk in confidence about Ethiopian graduates. Maybe we never wrote a personal statement. So what is personal statement? Why is it important? How do you write it? When do you start writing it? How many times do you have to edit it? Who has to help you editing it? And things like that. So, and how long should it be? Because I have seen some guys send me like, Fakara, can you review my personal statement? I don't have any choice. I say, okay, send it, let me look at it. It is 2 pages, 3 pages. Oh my gosh, you cannot write a personal statement which is as long as 3 pages. It's useless. They will just throw it away, I believe. So go ahead and talk about personal statement. Why is it important and things like that?
So the personal statement is the personal statement. It is your personal plea. You're introducing yourself, and it's a biased, essay on why you should be chosen for the residency, right? You get to select what you put down there. No one is telling you what to select. So, it demonstrates a lot about you, your values, your competencies, your desires, your experience. Again, you can't say that there's a formula necessarily for personal statements, but I can tell you the things that are important. Number one is that you need to be captivating. And I know, what does that mean to be captivating? I have trouble with writing English. How can I be captivating? Well, it's about, at least in the first paragraph, figuring out some way that you can capture the attention of the program director with the first 2 sentences, really, that's going to make them want to read more. It has to be something that's unique about how you ended up in medicine, why you're in medicine, and it can be original. It should be original. And you have to spend some time thinking about that. And I will tell you that it takes multiple drafts. I created a workbook that you can, if you go to my site, you can download it. But one of the parts of the workbook are 5 pages that have to do with brainstorming, because a lot of personal statements require that you brainstorm, meaning that you just put a bunch of stuff down on a piece of paper without really trying to edit it, without trying to decide whether it's useful or not useful. But you put a bunch of stuff down. You put down your experiences, you put down your values, you put down things that matter to you. And then you try to decide, is there a story there? Is there something in here that's really, really interesting about me? So it really has to be a plea as to why they should pick you as a resident for their program. Being authentic and being humble in that application, in that personal statement, comes through. I can tell, humility in a personal statement, and it's the tone, it's the way that you present things. But it doesn't mean that you don't highlight your achievements, because some people will say, well, I didn't highlight my achievements because it seemed like that was not humble. But you can highlight your achievements. It's just the way in which you do it and which achievements you choose to put down in that application. Don't try to be overly clever, though. I see people, honestly, I have seen applications where they decided that they wanted to write it like a script for a play or a poem. These sorts of things, I have never seen an Ethiopian try to do that, so I don't think that you would do it. But don't try to be too clever, and don't talk too much about personal stuff. And I mean personal stuff, I mean, things that you've gone through. I mean, I've had individuals who sent me their personal statements where half the personal statement was about, you know, the fact that they were diagnosed at some age with a cancer and they went through chemo and they're survivors and they're resilient and they're trying to highlight their resiliency and their, you know, that they've come through this horrific experience. And I get it. I understand that and I honor that, but that is not the place to do it, not in a personal statement. You don't want to give any reason for a program director to decide that maybe you're not up to the job. I had a personal statement the other day that talked about the individual wrote that they had had a learning disability. I mean, a learning disability. I said, why did you put that in your application? There's no place for that in your application. She had overcome this learning ability. She had tried hard and all of that. And sort of by dint of hard work, she had overcome it. But, you know, it doesn't belong in your application. Don't give them a reason to reject you, is what I would say. Give them a reason to want to know you and want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you.
Actually, personal statement is an advertisement, in other words. You are advertising yourself, you are selling your experiences, your attributes, and things like that. So you should convince somebody. You should be able to convince Dr. Parker to call you, to chat with you. Because remember, she has 3,000, 4,000 applicants waiting for the opportunity to talk to her. And she has to, you know, bring that down to only 60 candidates. Imagine. So part of it is based on the excellent job you did in writing your personal statement. You are advertising. So for example, if you are watching a television show and you see some sort of a trash advertisement about a certain brand, that doesn't really take you too long. I mean, a long way. But like your personal statement is just like that. You are advertising, promoting yourself. So you have to be really mindful. And the bottom line is, don't volunteer a lot of information, especially if it can backfire. Just like, you know, the learning disability, which is mentioned. You are applying for the highest job in office, and you cannot be demented, right? They'll kick you out. They'll kick you out. So you have to promote yourself. So the next question to you is red flags. This is very important for many of the IMG graduates. When I applied, I had a lot of red flags. Not because I was a poor candidate, but like, you know, my past experience was regarded by many as a red flag, whatever I have achieved. So sometimes your achievement may take you a long way, and sometimes your achievement can also somehow stand in your way. So like, you know, how can people really use their experience, past experience, as an advantage, which might be regarded by somebody as like, you know, red flag? For example, long years of service. Remember, you are going to work as a junior resident or as an intern with a fresh graduates from medical school. So if you have been a dean somewhere in the world, so people might think this guy has been running a medical school as a dean and now he's becoming an intern. So how is he going to blend in the team? You know, teamwork is very important. You shouldn't be a headache in the program. So if you are not going to listen to your like immediate senior residents who are junior, younger, then you are going to be a headache for 3 years. And it's just like, you know, a marriage where you cannot really get out of it. Once you match, you match. So they are stuck with you for 3 years until you complete your residency, your training. So, I mean, like, you know, these red flags are very important. And for many people, it could be something else. Some people may have attempts. Some people may have older. They may be regarded as old graduates. You know, if you are older than, like, you know, your graduation is older than 5 years, you are regarded as old graduates, things like that. So in general, let's talk about red flags. I don't want to go in greater detail into them because we can make them a topic for another session. So
Sure.
just say a little bit about red flags and how people can go up around it.
So, you know, firstly, in your personal statement, if you have a serious red flag, and I'm not talking, some people will say to me, you know, I got 230 on my, you know, 225 on my CK step 2. Is that a red flag? That's not a red flag. You're not going to point that out. But if you failed, if there's a gap in your, you know, in your application in terms of your clinical work, if, as he stated, you have had extensive experience in your country and you've had lots of achievement, how do you talk about that? And simply, I would say this: you have to demonstrate that anything they might see as a red flag is actually something that you learned from if it's a failure on something that you've learned from, that you're stronger for, and is not going to be an issue for them. If you have had, let's say you're, let's take a prime example. Let's say you're a surgeon and you're coming to this country and you want to do medicine. You've got to convince them that, number one, why are you interested in medicine? But you also got to convince them that you're changing specialties, but that there's transferable skills that you learned in your old specialty, like collaboration, like patient care, like punctuality, like reliability, like in communication with all sorts of people and professionals, that those are all transferable. You have some new material you have to learn. You have new applications, but some of the basic tenets of being a doctor are not going to be different. And in fact, you have a heads up on it because you've had experience. Again, you have to demonstrate that you're not a threat. If you were an academic dean, they see you as a threat. How the hell is this guy going to be in my program? He's going to be a pain in the ass for all these years. You've got to demonstrate that you have a beginner's mind, that even though you've mastered things, that you understand that there are still gaps in your knowledge. There's still things that you don't know. You don't know the American system. There are things that, it was like all my Ethiopians, when a patient would come in with a fever, you know what they'd say? It's got to be malaria, number one, number two, typhoid fever. And we'd all go, well, okay, that's not the differential in this country. We have to, that's all the way at the bottom of our list, if that. So there are new things that you have to learn when you come to a country that is different from yours and has a different patient populations and different things to consider. So being open-minded and just showcasing the fact that whatever happened to you, you've learned from it, or that you are going to be 100% adaptable to a new environment. Those are the key things. And that you must mention it in your personal statement. Most people will say, well, I didn't want to mention it. You know what? Maybe they wouldn't notice. They wouldn't notice. Are you kidding? Of course we're going to notice. And I always looked for it. And I said, why haven't they said anything about it? And if they hadn't said anything about it, that to me in itself was a red flag that could exclude them, because I said, they haven't even tried to explain this to me. And the only way that I'm going to get an explanation is if I interview them. And I'm not sure I want to use one of my interview spots to try to figure out why this red flag exists and if it's really serious or it's not. So dissuade them from considering that your red flag is really important. That's what your job is.
You really brought a very important matter, because for those people who did some other specialties like ophthalmology or surgery like that of mine, subspecialty like that of mine, and things like that, you know what most of the people advise you, your friends, don't include that in your CV. How dumb is that? Because I'm sorry for my terminology, excuse my word, but very, very inappropriate. Because what does that mean? Because I spent 7 years studying, 4 years of general surgery, 3 years of cardiothoracic. That's 7 years of my life, my work experience. How am I going to fill that gap if I exclude those experiences from there? Can you imagine it? So that by itself creates another chaos. So the bottom line is, whatever you have to demonstrate that it is going to be used in terms of your own advantage and to the institution's advantage for that matter. You know what I mean? You should be proud of it. You shouldn't be ashamed of it. If you are ashamed of it, that by itself is a red flag, because you are not confident about your past experience and all that. So this question is raised by many people, because many people, when they move here, they want to change specialties for one reason or another. And some of the people, the advices they are getting is something which can destroy everything to them. So be true to yourself, and you should have an integrity in your application as well. And you cannot hide an elephant in the room. You know what I mean? It's just like that. How can you hide an elephant in this small room? You can't, literally. They will figure it out, either during the interview process or during the application. So that would hurt yourself. So I think it's a very important point you have raised. So the next important topic would be letter of recommendations. And many people approach me to write them a letter of recommendation. I want to give also a small remark about how I am going to deal about writing letter of recommendation. Those of you who have never worked with me, you shouldn't ask me for a letter of recommendation, because that's going to destroy my reputation here, because letter of recommendation is regarded as a very important thing, because you are testifying about somebody. You are just giving your word about that person, and you cannot do that for somebody whom you don't know. So those of you who have never worked with someone shouldn't necessarily ask that person to write you a letter of recommendation, because it can backfire, because that person doesn't know you much and they cannot say much about you. So whatever letters they give you could be something superficial, and that is not going to take you anywhere. So I will give you the stage so that you can talk further about letter of recommendations. Why is it important? Who can write you a letter of recommendation? And for IMGs, most people panic because they don't have a letter writer from the US. So is that very important? Should they panic about it? If you have it, you have it. But like, if you don't have it, do you have to panic about, like, getting a letter from somebody who is based in the US? So you can go ahead and talk
Oh, I
about it.
think that the issue with the letters, to me, and again, this is my opinion, but what really matters is that you have people who know you, who could write about you, who can write about your work, who can write about your character, who can endorse you, who really can endorse you in an authentic way. And I used to see letters coming. I mean, I know who they are. I won't mention them here, but I know the Ethiopians in the United States that write probably, I don't even know how many, 30, 40, 50 letters, maybe more every year for applicants that they don't know. And when I would see their name, I would look at the application, I would see their name on the bottom, and I would just put the letter to the side, because I knew they didn't know them. And that I get it, they were trying to do it as a nice gesture for people that were from their country, but it wasn't helpful to them. And they may be outstanding clinicians, outstanding educators. I don't even know, and I still remember the names, but I felt like, why were they doing it? It wasn't good for their own reputation, as he said, but more importantly, really, aside from the letter writer's reputation, it wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful. Now, if they've known you before, if they worked with you when you were a student, that's different. Then I think it is helpful, because then it will come on letterhead that's from the United States or from wherever they are, and that will be helpful for you. But your job is to try to get the best letters you can, if you don't have those, from people that are in Ethiopia. And what that really means, and I know it's a challenge, but it means that you have to go speak with those individuals. You have to give them some information about yourself. You have to give them your CV. You have to say, would you honor me with, 30 minutes, 15 minutes of your time, so I can talk to you about what I'm doing, why the rotation, why the work that I did with you was so important. Like, butter them up. Tell them, I still remember when I worked with you, and it was like a defining part of my medical career that I had that experience with you. And jog their memory and make them want to write you a great letter, and give them some advice about how to write a letter. I always give my people templates of how to sort of go about doing it, to help them out. So that would be it. Now, do you have to have only letters from that? No, if you've done research with somebody, get one research letter. If you have a great, place where you've worked, get somebody who's one of your colleagues or your boss at work, whoever it knows you best and knows you recently. And if you're reapplying, don't use letters from last year. Get the individual who wrote the letter to, even if they're going to duplicate the letter, at least get them to put the current date on the program, on their letter. So, because otherwise it looks like a clear evidence that you applied last year and you didn't match.
That's also another important issue, because, like, some people do import letter of recommendations from the previous year, and that shouldn't be done as much as possible. Sometimes it may be difficult, Dr. Parker, to get a hold of a letter writer. It's a headache, because some people are busy. They are not doing it intentional, but for the majority of the people, they are extremely busy, and people do not understand how busy we could be. So I have to find you a little bit of extra time to go ahead and try to download the letterhead, print the letter, proofread it, sign it, scan it, re-upload it, go to ARS application website and upload it for you. It has some hassle, and it may take time, and people may not have the luxury of doing that quick enough. So one of the things I advise you and encourage you to do is, just like, if you are applying for September, you have to start communicating with the letter writers now.
Yes.
Before you even start working on the ERAS application, because your ERAS application, writing a personal statement, is something else. They are not related. So your letter writers should start working on it now, today. So if you haven't contacted the letter writers today, do it today. Don't even wait until tomorrow. That's the bottom line, because sometimes you have to communicate only via email, and that person may not have a good habit checking his email, or sometimes whatever email you have sent may go to junk and they may not see it. And sometimes you have a long list of emails, and I filter my emails, so I just quickly scan amongst all the emails I'm receiving every day, so it can easily be missed. So you have to follow up. You have to nag people in a nice way. The other thing I see, Dr. Parker, is that some people, they ask you for a favor and they are rude when they communicate to you. I'm so sorry to say that. So the wording and everything, you know what I mean? And when you decline, the way they address the fact that you declined is also so unprofessional. The way they respond to you, you can feel their anger when you kindly decline that you cannot give them a letter. You are being honest. I have never worked with you. I cannot write you a good letter. Try to find somebody else. I'm advising you, actually. And then you should be really appreciative of that. So some people, when they respond to you, they are a little, you can read the aggression from the response they give you. So don't be like that, because nobody, even if I don't write you a letter, I can help you in another way. I can mentor you. I can give you another helpful tips. I can connect you with people. You know what I mean? But if you turn me off with the way of your communications, and you turn many people who can potentially help you. So you should be mindful of that. So before we forget, so let's talk about the medical student performance evaluation letter, which comes from Ethiopia in our case, and from India, from Pakistan, from wherever it is. The dean has to write it. And unfortunately, like if you graduate 10 years ago, the dean at that time is gone. So what is the format they should use? Do they just get a regular letter, or do they have to look into a certain guideline where they have to incorporate important stuff in that so that they can compete with the US graduates?
Right. So it is the MSPE, the Medical Student Performance Evaluation. It's very standard in the United States. I mean, everybody's looks a little bit differently because it's formatted differently, and some have more information than others. But I would encourage people to talk to their deans, and there is a standard format that is put out by I guess it's the AAMC, as to how to write these. And you can look online, you can find examples of it, but it has specific components that they want to include in there. And I would make sure, if you can, that you can influence your dean to do things that way. Part of the application is that the first page is really the note. It's now, they changed the title, but it's called Noteworthy Characteristics. And you can have 3 noteworthy characteristics about yourself. And that may be an opportunity for you to meet, if you can. I don't know if it's even feasible in your country, to meet with whoever's going to write this thing up and say, I just wanted to kind of let you know, these are the things that I did. They'll know what your academic performance is, but I participated in these volunteer activities. This was my service. Or other, it's three categories. Usually the first is academic, the second one may be service, the other one might be some other awards you did or something unusual, or maybe participation in student organizations during your medical school or something like that. But it should look as much as you can. I like them not to look so different from your US counterparts, to try at least to get some consensus so they look similar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. That's very insightful. So candidates, try to look into the guidelines, try to look into the format, and probably send the format to your dean, and you can kind of kindly ask them to mirror it as much as possible. They may not really exactly match the US format, because some of our ways things are done in Ethiopia is completely different from that of the US medical schools. Something which is done in India, completely different. Something done in Nigeria is completely different from that of what is being followed
Right.
From Ethiopia or somewhere else. So try to send the format and try to match it. So somebody have asked Dr. Gabriel from LinkedIn. I have displayed the question. So he asked, does this mean all the recommendation letter could be from, actually he has corrected it, could be from outside of USA, which means if you are from Ethiopia and you do not have any letter writer from the US, can you get all the letters of recommendations from Ethiopia? That is what he's trying to say.
I
So
mean,
if you don't have, yeah, if it is from
oh,
India, all yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
you can. I mean, again, it's on you to try to get letters that are really good from those people. But yes, yes.
So it's a big relief for a majority of you who have been panicking about getting letters from the US. Make sure that you have excellent letters. It doesn't matter who wrote it. Somebody who knows you should advertise for you, just like the personal statement. So you have to focus about getting a strong letter of recommendation than getting a weak letter from, like, from the US. You know what I mean? So that has to be done carefully. Thank you so much. So we are almost finishing most of our questions, but now we are coming to the most important part of this discussion. Why do I say this is the most important part of this discussion? So most of this information, one way or another, some people may have a little bit of an information about the things we talked about, but I would like to emphasize what you are doing right now. Because like I said, for the past 25 years, you have been creating a lot of opportunities to IMGs, and now you came with another capacity. So you are a student and interview coach and mentor. So you are doing this for the past 2 years, if I'm not wrong. So let's talk about IMG Specialties LLC. Why did you form this institution or organization? What is the intention? Why are you doing this? And what are the services you are offering? And I will highlight, I will ask you a couple of other follow-up questions. And now, our followers, please stay tuned. There are about 70 people watching on LinkedIn and 40 people on YouTube. So total about 110 individuals are following the program. So you should listen now, because now I am highlighting this because Dr. Parker is mentoring and coaching people in this application process. So I'll try to emphasize why getting this service is important. I'm not promoting Dr. Parker, by the way. I'm trying to help you get the help, the necessary help you need to stand out in this rigorous, challenging process. So go ahead, Dr. Parker. Let's talk about IMG Specialties LLC a little bit.
Sure. So, as when I was program director, I vetted so many applications and interviewed so many people, and I would see flaws in their applications. I would get to the point where I interviewed them, and they would effectively cancel themselves out during their interview because they didn't have the interview skills, because there was red flags on their application that they hadn't discussed properly. And I always wanted to help them. I always wanted to say, but I couldn't. That wasn't my job at that point. So when I left, teaching and gave up the program directorship, our hospital was closed because of economic things, and we moved to another location, and it didn't really work out for me. So I decided, what do I know how to do best, and what would I really like to do? And I ended up deciding, really, it wasn't a decision. It just was what I knew that I had to do, was to try to continue to help people who I felt needed help to get, to do better and to be able to win residency spots in this country. I mean, I help US grads. I help people that are, individuals who are US from the Caribbean as well. But the vast majority of the people that I work with are all non-US IMGs. So that's what I do. And I have, I do a variety of things. I work with people on their applications. I work with people on their personal statements. I do interview coaching, which we didn't get a chance to talk about. And maybe if we have another one of these, we'll talk about interviews, because there's a whole set of criteria that get you to the interview stage that we look at. And then there's a whole other set of criteria that, once you've interviewed, determine where you are on the match list. So it really behooves you to learn how to interview properly. And just like you mentioned before, you haven't really had the experience, many of you, of really having to fill out these standardized applications for jobs. You just they like you, you've done well, you get the job, and the application, if there is one, or the interview, is just sort of perfunctory. It's like, hey, how you doing? You shake hands, you've got the job. This is not like that at all. And so I coach people and teach them how to interview properly. And I'm really proud of that, to be honest with you, because last year I had a lot of individuals who had one interview, and they got matched. And I'm not trying to say if you have one interview, you're going to get matched. But I had individuals who, worked with me on their interview skills and said it was a game changer for them. It was a game changer for them. They learned how to interview. They felt confident. And of course, confidence is a huge thing going into an interview. And they handled themselves very, very differently than they would have when they went in. And so, I think that all of those services can be very important. Some people select services individually. Some people are now buying packages of services, which give them some kind of a discounted price.
Thank you so much. I mean, I feel proud that you are discussing this matter with me today, because I met you in person back in 2018 because I was an applicant. I don't know where I was heading. I didn't know what I was doing and things like that. I've done a lot of interviews. I have interviewed a lot of people myself in medical school, but the way we have been doing it, the way things are being run in the US may not be completely matching, So I have practiced in India, as you know, I have practiced in Sweden, but I was confident coming to the interviews, but did I do great in all of those interviews? Who knows? Maybe yes, maybe not. So I wish I had the privilege to be mentored by somebody who knows how to do it. Because I know the person you were mentioning, because he had one interview in dermatology, he matched to dermatology. So matching to dermatology is incredibly very difficult and hard for international medical graduates, let alone for IMGs, it's very competitive even for US graduates, because the spots are limited and the lifestyle people like it. The income after the end of your residency is very high. So it's very tough to go into dermatology program. But I know you mentored him, you guided him, you helped him. He ended up matching, and he ended up matching in one of the top institutions actually in the US. So not only matching, he matched into the best program. So coaching really matters. So that is the reason why I want you to pay attention, and I want you to stay with us until the end of this discussion. And this discussion is not going to end here today. So we are going to have a series of discussions every 2 weeks or so as time allows. And then we'll be focusing on multiple issues. So someone has asked us about how many programs should we apply. So that is one of the things you can highlight. And the other, which I was going to ask you, I'm highlighting, you can read it as well, right? So thank you for this enlightening program. How does lacking US clinical experience affect our application? So I was going to ask you about what does a US clinical, I will come back to IMG Specialties LLC, but let's address it before we move further. So what is US clinical experience? Which US clinical experience are valued by programs? And what about in person versus virtual clinical experiences? If you can say some things about these things, it would be great.
So US clinical experiences, I would say it's kind of a treacherous environment, to be honest with you. There are US clinical experiences that are from university programs or university, community programs that are university affiliated. And those are actually usually very good things that you can do, but you have to apply for them typically. They're not easy to get, and you have to kind of plan ahead. There are a lot of other company, and those usually, but not always, don't charge you too much money. But not always. Some of them are still very expensive, very expensive. There are other individuals who are I call them residency or rotation brokers, who are selling you rotations. And these rotations, I think, are a very varied, what's the word? Varied quality. Some of the quality of those rotations is extremely poor in my mind, because you end up coming there and then you're one of 20 people on a rotation, and you really are not able to really single yourself out to learn things, to really shine. And it's hard sometimes to figure out which those things are. But Having said all that, is U.S. clinical experience important? Yes. If you can get it, yes. But listen, a lot of Ethiopians can't even get a B1, B2 visa out of their country to be able to get clinical experience. So what I would say to you is if you can get it and you can afford it and you can get a visa, then come try to do it at a reputable place, not just something that you pay $3,000 for the rotation, and and you're one of many people that are on that rotation. Don't believe everything you read out on site. You really need to do your due diligence before you plunk down money and hopes and dreams and all that to do some of these rotations. But if you're not able to do US clinical experience in this country, then then you're not. And you just have to work on the rest of your application. There are plenty of people that I got in. I didn't get them in. I helped them get in to programs that didn't have any US clinical experience, and they still got in. So the advantage is that there are some program directors who seem to think that this US clinical experience is very valuable. And if they see you have it, they're more inclined to invite you for an interview. And you'll probably get more interviews if you have US clinical experience. It still doesn't mean you're going to get in. You may have more interviews, and then you may bomb your interviews because you're not really a good candidate and you've just had US clinical experience. So US clinical experience not alone isn't going to get you the job. It may get you interviews, and then how you present yourself and everything else about you may get you the job. But it's just not worth, I don't think, worrying about if you can't get it. I mean, what's the point of worrying about things that we can't change? Let's work on the things that we can change and that we can control. I show people all the time when I'm working with them, like, what are the things that you can control? Because the things that are out of your control are out of your control. And if you're wasting time thinking about them, you're wasting time which could be used for other much more helpful things, much things that are much more beneficial in your life.
Thank you so much. Very great advice. So don't worry too much about something you cannot change. That's a fact of the matter. Move on, work on other attributes, and show your strengths. Try to stand out. So don't waste your time focusing about something you cannot change. That's the bottom line. Let's come back to IMG Specialties LLC. So I was looking into the success story of your company. Yourself, actually. There is nobody. It's Dr. Parker. So your success story in the past year match season. So 45 of the candidates who worked with you matched. These candidates were coming from 11 different countries, not only Ethiopians, from different places, India, I've seen Iraq and other places, I don't remember exactly. And 9 different specialties from the top, like, highly competitive specialties like gynecology, obstetrics, dermatology, and to internal medicine, family medicine, pathology, and others, neurology, and others. So congratulations. I want to congratulate you. And I would like to congratulate all those candidates who made it, because it's a big success for everyone involved. So let's talk about that experience. How does that translate? Because you didn't work with them throughout the application process. I think you met the majority of them during the interview season. So the maximum you got the opportunity to work with them was to coach them for interviews and things like that. What about the rest of the service? Because your packages are not only about coaching for an interview. So you work starting from ERAS application review, you work on personal statement editing, you work on mentoring sessions, you work on CV review, CV transformation, letter of recommendation review and editing, and professional characteristics and all that, and brief consultations for whoever wants your, advices in between in the process. So a lot of packages are going on. So let's talk about it, because I think there will be a lot of success stories more than the previous years this year, because you get the opportunity to work with candidates throughout the entire process. Let's hear from you about your experience.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, this last year, I worked on interviews, and a few people I was able to polish their personal statements during the SOAP. because we had some success in soap, which is really quite unique. I had 2 people that I work with that were successful in soap. But here's what I want to tell you is that those individuals I matched, I had a 70% match rate, okay, of the individuals I worked with. And the individuals, because I kept stats, but unfortunately, I wish I had more. I mean, I wasn't thinking about, the business end and that I needed to keep stats and everything. And afterwards I said, oh my God, let me look at these people and see who they were. And what I found out was that the average year of graduation was 2015 for my cohort. So they were 9 years out of graduation from medical school. So that would have been a red flag. I deal with red flag populations. Maybe you could say that, right? They had good scores. I will tell you, they had good scores on average, but not everyone had good scores. Not everyone had good scores. The majority of people, if you took out maybe the 10 individuals that I coached that really had lots of interviews, if you took that out, the average number of interviews that the people that I dealt with had was 2 or 3 interviews. That was it. 2 or 3 interviews. And if you look at the data, that would tell you that they had a very low chance of getting into a program. 30%, 20%, maybe. And they got in. So one of the things I want to say to you is that if you have one interview, you can match. You can. It's no guarantee of a match, right? Once you get to 10, 15 interviews, you're probably going to match because there's that many people who thought you were good enough to interview you. But you can people sort of got despondent and they said, I just have one interview. And I said, okay, let's go. Let's get you revved up for that one interview because it's your one opportunity. Why not see it as, why not see the glass is right now it's half full. You might get there. Okay, so the services, I offer the individual services, and then I had a lot of people who always said, we want packages, and I said, okay, and so I bundled them into a basic package, which was just the ARIS application personal statement and a mock interview, and I discounted, like all the packages, I discount them 20%. And then I have a more comprehensive premium package where I added to that a mentoring CV services. And so there was a little bit more in that package because I've actually found that having mentoring services are really, really helpful for people. They have lots of questions. And I can't really respond to, a list of 10 questions online and answer all those questions because it's my time and it's a lot of effort. There's also a package for just interviews. If you feel like you really know that you're not good at that, you can get a package with just mentoring and repeating mock interviews so that we can go through those things carefully. I think some people that's beneficial for, but I wouldn't tell people to buy a mock interview package in general because I think one interview, if you really take that and run with it and do the work that I've suggested that you do after it, is probably enough for the majority of people. It really is. If you interviewed last year and you were told that you didn't interview well, then that's a different story potentially. But I think most people, I wouldn't push them to buy that. There's crafting your personal statement. There's some people who just have no clue. They just don't feel like they can even start writing their personal statement. So there's a package where they can work with me more intensively and have more sessions to try to get that personal statement honed. So that's what I do. I love to work with you guys. It's a pleasure. It's what I love to do. And I hope that, some of you will feel the need and have the resources, which I know is really a limiting factor for everybody, to have the resources to find someone who can sort of help you afford those services. And we decided today, right, that we were going to kind of do something special, right?
Yeah, we'll do something special, but I want to highlight before we go into that route, because and at the end of the day, there are a lot of questions coming, so we'll address that, one by one. But fellow candidates, either you are from Ethiopia or somewhere else, I am advising you as an old brother and candidly, because this application process is your fortune. It's your future, it's your career. It may cost you a lot of money. It still costs me a lot of money because medicine, you don't stop somewhere. Once you are done with residency, you may have an ambition to go for subspecialty and things like that. It's another process, another expense. It's never ending. It's a lot of money in investment, but it is worth it. So you should know what to invest, when to invest, and where to invest it. So I know Dr. Parker in person, and we have worked on multiple things together. And I know her character, I know her reputability, and I know her personality. She's just like a mother. Go back, look into the website of LLC specialties. I mean, like IMG specialties, the testimony she got. In the US, when you want to buy a service, the most important thing you want to do is read reviews. It is a hotel, you go to the review section, read about it. What did customers say about that place? If it is a shoe which you are purchasing, read about the reviews. If you don't read the review and you buy something, you are just like you lost your money. So go back and read what testimony she has got from those people who have worked with her. She cared for them. And if you remember at the beginning of our discussion, she described this process as handling an egg. So you should be working with somebody who knows what they are doing. So, and that is Dr. Parker. So some people might think because of the currency issue, the dollar issue, particularly for applicants from Ethiopia, we do not have credit cards and things like that. We cannot do international interactions, transactions and things like that. But I would like to coordinate with Kirubel, Hakim Kirubel. You know him, Kira, is my little brother, Dr. Parker. You had an interview with him last year. He's a great guy. So he was talking about how people can get international credit cards while they are living in Ethiopia and things like that. So if you have the money, you can have an international account and you can do the payment yourself. But the other thing you can do is talk to family, friends. It's a big investment. You can help them out tomorrow if you successfully match. So really, 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 I encourage you, I advise you, especially if you think you have a lot of red flags, work with Dr. Parker. Take my word, and you'll thank me at the end of the process. Believe me. So that's one of the things I would like to say. And the other thing is, the package, I look into them. And I was wondering, for sure, I know how much, physicians can make if they work in a hospital or in a clinic. You are not doing that. You chose to do this. And the commitment is a lot. So once somebody buys this basic package, there is a lot of back end for it, right? Personal statement is not going to be done with one session. There is going to be a lot of back end for it. It's a lot of involvement in terms of extensive time investment in your side. And I was wondering, what is she getting out of it? To be honest with you, if you think about the income she's generating, it's literally nothing. I'm telling you, because I know how much she's worth. And the $600 package you pay is going to be for many items, and those items are not going to be limited to 1 hour session, which is mentioned in the session, because I know Dr. Parker, she goes above and beyond. So please, my brothers and sisters, whether you are Ethiopians or from other country, I want you to seriously think about it. And remember, if you end up not matching this year, believe me, you will be forced to work with Dr. Parker next year. What about that? You told because Dr. Parker, I remember from my personal experience, when you are applying, I matched the first time I applied. I didn't have to wait the next year and all that during residency application. But the thing is, you are over ambitious most of the time, because we all graduated from medical school with flying colors, and we think we can do it by ourselves and things like that. And we are always confident. We never failed. We have never had an attempt. We are always scoring A's and things like that. We are on the top in terms of scores. So we assume things would turn out positively like that in the US. But no, because I really do have friends who have failed too much, twice, 3 times, and things like that. What about that? So every year you are entering this cycle, it's a lot of investment. So if you are wise, you invest your money now, you do it to the best of your capacity, you match the first time you apply, done. That's a wise investment. But if you want to try it yourself, you try it, You are not successful, second year, it becomes harder and things like that. So you have to be mindful. And having said that, Dr. Parker, before we proceed about our giveaways and all that, let's address some of the questions. So, for example, is being a reapplicant, for example, our friend is asking exactly the same thing I was mentioning. Is being a reapplicant a red flag?
No, it is not. It is not anything you should certainly mention on your application. Sometimes people do bring it up in their interviews, and I think that's fine if there's, if sometimes it's an appropriate thing to do. But being a reapplicant, it just means that, you have to have an application that is different this year. You have to have something that's better. It should give you the impetus to consider, how to revitalize your application, and if at all possible, if you did get any interviews last year, to try to find out or try to understand what you didn't maybe do well. Like, why did you not match? But it's not a red flag. There's many, many, many. I mean, listen, I just showed in the beginning, 58.25% of people matched last year. How many then people would be considered red flags? 41.5%. I mean, how can that be a red flag? It just can't be. But it means that there are a lot of people out there who haven't matched. And, it's interesting. Some people come to me and they tell me all these other things. And then at the end I say, well, wait a minute, let me just ask you a few more questions. And then finally, they concede that they didn't match. And I said, why didn't you tell me that from the outset? I mean, I'm here to help you. If you work with me, listen, integrity is everything to me. I will help you and do anything I can for you. I will be honest with you. I will make you work. I need people who are willing to work, that they're willing to look at themselves. They're willing to revise things. They're willing to reflect, and that they're going to work as hard as I'm going to work with them. But they can't hide things from me, because how the hell can I help you if you're going to hide stuff from me? So I work with people who have applied once or twice before, not infrequently. 41%, if that would be the stats of my people, should be reapplicants.
And the most important thing is, even the US graduates may end up not matching. I remember one medical student from MCW panicking on the match day. She didn't match. And so it's one of the best medical schools in the US, MCW. But she ended up not matching. And there are many out there, even US graduates may end up not matching, 41%. So don't focus on that. Don't dwell on that. Just be smart. Try to do it the first time you are applying. If successful, well and good. If not, that's not the end of the world. For next year, you work hard, you invest more, and you make it happen. That is the bottom line. Somebody, to your celebrities, I live in the Scandinavia. How can I apply from, how can I do it? Any advice? Just listen to this conversation all over again. It's just like whether you are in Scandinavia, in Ethiopia, India, Nigeria, Ghana, Burkina Faso, the process is the same. Wherever we are coming from, Canada, it doesn't matter. Europe, it doesn't matter. So just like, go back and listen to our conversation. And Mohammed asked, applying to the same department we specialize in Ethiopia, would it increase our matching to the same specialty? For example, internist applying for internal medicine, pediatrician applying for internal medicine, or pediatrics, surgeon applying for surgery and all that.
My feeling was always yes. I don't know that everybody would agree with me. I think the question is, you need to leverage that experience and demonstrate to them how that's helpful to them. The fact that you've been trained already. And as I mentioned before, you have to show your strength that way, but you have to show that you're not, as I said before, specifically a threat to them, and that you're going to be accepting of being retrained. I mean, listen, I remember having somebody, you mentioned it, I had someone who was the dean of their medical school, and he entered my program. And I was really I had a lot of trepidation about it. It really wasn't a problem. It was never a problem. He was there to retrain, and now he went on to fellowship, and he's a professor at, one of the medical schools in this country. But even, knowing what I'm telling you, I wasn't sure about him. So you have to convince people that your previous experience is relevant, it matters, it's going to be helpful, and it should not deter them from hiring you.
Thank you so much. That's insightful. So somebody has appreciated our discussion. Of course, Dr. Parker is speaking, so it should be enlightening, right? So thank you so much. So Daniel said non-accredited fellowship in the US is that favored positively. I don't think if it has any relevance during residency application, but if you want to say something, you can say something about it, or we can discuss it in our next sessions in the future.
I mean, we see every year, we see some people who have gone to these non-accredited fellowships. You know, I mean, I think maybe some people have, it helps a little bit, because how can it help? It can help because you can get a letter from a US program that knows your work, and it's really that letter. That letter is going to matter, but a non-accredited fellowship is going to be what, 2-3 years of your time, and so that you have to decide whether that's worth it. It doesn't automatically guarantee you a residency spot, but it will, if you do well in that fellowship, it will get you it could get you a great letter, and it could be a key to your entry.
And the other thing is it's going to be also counted as a US clinical experience in that way. So
well, and the other thing is that, you know, there's other issues related to these things, because they count towards your J1 visa, you know, requirements. And so you have to kind of be careful about all that. And I'm not a visa expert in any stretch of the imagination, but you have a certain amount of time if you're on a J1 here to complete your process. And so it's problematic, I think, to some extent, if you don't match after you've been in a fellowship program.
That is very true, because you will be forced to go back to the country of origin to give service, especially if you are coming here with J1 visa, unless you get a waiver. You can apply for a waiver, but there is a lot of caveat with that. So you have to convince that the country of origin doesn't want you to go back. And number two, you are going to be willing to work in an underserved community or society, even after residency. If you are here with J1 visa, then it's going to be a little bit problematic. So, I mean, you know, those of you who can complete your step 3, you will be eligible for H1B visa application, and that's much better than coming here with J1. But no option, there is no option. Just do with J1. You can apply for a waiver. You will worry when you are reaching at that level. So don't worry about the visa process. And we can talk about it in other sessions if you want to. So the other question, does your cumulative GPA in medical school affect the probability to match?
Well, this is a complicated issue, honestly, because if you compare people from other countries in general, from non-US countries, the GPAs are all lower. Okay, I'll say this with the risk of probably, you know, some medical schools would take issue with me, but there is much grade inflation in this country. I've seen medical schools where every single candidate that they graduated had, you know, the worst grade was a B plus, okay, a 3.3, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. You know, there are C students, there are B students, there are A students. The problem with looking at, for instance, applications from Ethiopia, or actually applications, I just was dealing with someone the other day from India, Sri Lanka, these countries, they don't even have A, B, and C. They have a certain, you know, it's like out of 600, and they'll say, I got 414 points out of 600, and that's with distinction. But for us, it looks terrible. The same thing with Ethiopian applications. There's not many of you. There are a few, but there are not many of you that have A's in everything during medical school. I mean, I learned that, you know, if you had A's and B's, you were outstanding. If you have A's, B's, and some C's, you were excellent. You know, I mean, and a lot of people have B's and C's, and they're still very competent, good doctors. And they may have a GPA that to us in the United States doesn't look good. Just to give you an idea, the average GPA of individuals, and I know this, going to medical schools in the United States right now is about a 3.85. That's what they look for. So, you know, either there's great inflation at the college level too, but so when I see a GPA, I just worked with a gold medalist in her country, right? And she was very proud. She said, my GPA was 3.41. And I said, we're not going to put that on your application. I'm going to put that you're a gold medalist, that you graduated with distinction, that, you know, you got 12 out of your 14 subjects, you know, you got distinction in, but I'm not going to put that GPA in there because I don't want somebody who doesn't know about what that GPA means to try to compare you to US people. Now, having said that, I would generally say that what they're going to be looking at is, in general, if they look at your academic record, they're going to look to see that you didn't have to remediate things. Nobody wants to see an F in anything. They don't want to see anything about any professionalism issues. Those are definitely red flags. But they're going to concentrate, honestly, on your steps when they look at something that's numeric. So if there's one thing I can tell any of you who have not yet taken your USMLEs, is take them really seriously. I mean, you can believe in standardized tests or not. You know, if I had time, I would tell you my whole perspective about them. But one of the things that is very, very clear in almost every specialty, but not all specialties, but in almost every specialty, the better you do on that step 2 exam. Now that step one used to be something that IMGs did very well on. And so it was actually to the detriment of IMGs to take away that step 1 exam because they usually far exceeded their US counterparts. But now that that's just pass fail, everything becomes focused on that step 2. And so I would say, you know, for every 10, you know, for 200 to 209, 210 to 219, every score, every, you know, 10 more points pushes you into a different category in terms of the number of interviews and your likelihood of matching. So if you're about ready to take that test and you don't think you're going to do well on it, don't take it. Wait. And I know that's an expense, that's all those kinds of things, but it will bring you a lot of heartache if you take the test under extenuating circumstances where you've got too much else going on, you don't do well on it. And then that is probably the biggest regret I hear over and over again from applicants. They knew that they shouldn't have taken the test. Too much was going on. They had taken practice tests. They hadn't done that well. They were just hoping for the best, and it didn't happen.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. I really feel sad because step 1 is taken away.
Mhm.
Because step 1 was like, you know, game changer, like you said, for many IMGs, because we can do it. We did well, the majority of us, and the majority of US graduates, their average maybe 220s, 230s. So the majority of IMGs, 240s, 250s, 260s. That was a big advantage because, like, you know, USME list step 1 score was the one which was the primary actually selection criteria, right? You can tell us more about it. So I mean, like, you know, that was to our advantage. Now it is taken, and believe me, step 2 CK, almost everybody scores very high. It was easier because, like, you know, the majority of the material is repeating. It's a clinical questions, so people find it interesting to read. It's not boring. You score high, so the scores are inflated. Even in the past, CK, I mean, if you score 245 in step 1, rest assured you will score 260 something in step 2 CK. So now almost everybody is scoring 275 to 80. I get shocked sometimes because I didn't score that much, I have to be honest. So, like, you know, now it's becoming more fierce because CK is easier and almost everybody across the board is scoring high. So be mindful. Don't rush things. Don't rush things. If you are not ready, wait another year. It's okay. It's painful. It's painful. You are hoping to start after a year, but it's going to be extended by 2 years. That is much better than, like, you know, having to go through the application process 2-3 times, and that's a very painful experience. Thank you, Dr. Parker. Research and publication. What about that?
Okay, research and publication. So research and publication is interesting. I would say this as a first comment. Number one, the importance of research and publications depends to a significant degree on the specialty that you select, because there's some specialties that are much more geared towards wanting you to have publications, and also the type of programs. So, and I would say, let's say you look at medicine. Medicine tends to be programs that are interested in publications. Not as much as something like surgery or, you know, or some of the really competitive specialties, but they care to some extent about your research and your publications. The more competitive the program, so if you move from, let's say, a rural internal medicine program, and then on the other hand you have a large university program, that university program is probably going to care a whole lot more about publications than that rural program does. And in fact, we don't have the granular data like that. I mean, somebody probably does. The individual universities have it, but I people aren't going to get into a competitive U.S. program in internal medicine if they don't have some kind of research or publications. And again, what does it demonstrate? I mean, I would like to go back to that. Part of having things on your application demonstrates your interest, demonstrates that you're someone who's committed to academics, that you're committed to evidence-based medicine, that you have interest in these things. So it's not just a number of publications. I think it speaks to your self-development, your interest in contributing, and it tells a lot about you as an individual. So do I think it matters? Yes. Do I think it matters more depending on the type of program? Yes. And some specialties, if you don't, I mean, if you're going to apply to a competitive specialty and you have no publications, I would say that would be a problem for you. It's still possible that you could match, but realize that that's going to be a decrement. And there's data. I mean, there's website data from the NRMP that you can look by specialty and you can see if you had one publication, what was the chances of your matching or being unmatched? If you had 1, 2, 3, 4, or greater than 5 publications, that's how it's been broken down. So, if you want to go into family medicine, they don't care that much about publications. They care about your commitment to your specialty, and they want to know that you really, really want to take care of families. That's really important to them. But if you're going into surgery, they want to see publications. If you're going into radiology, my God, they want to see publications. So you better have publications. Otherwise, I think, they're going to have other candidates who will. They're going to have other candidates who will. And so, you're at a disadvantage.
Yes. So like, if you are going to somewhere, to some specialty which is highly competitive, most of the time, one of the filtering mechanism they would have would be like, research done in that particular specialty, things around it. So if you are applying for orthopedics, okay, you have to have maybe minimum 5, 6, more than that publications in orthopedics. Otherwise, you have to know that your chances are going to be very slim. If you are lucky, if you know somebody who worked with you and who believed in you, may give you the spot. Otherwise, it's going to be challenging. So just like any other attribute, research is one of them. It's important. But if you have it, you have it. If you don't have it, don't worry too much about it. Go forward. And then in the meantime, even if you are applying this year, work on research. So if you are worried about research, works on something. And until you match, until the interview process comes, you may have 1 or 2 publications. And during the interview season, you can tell them that you can update them that you do have publications now. And if they ask you about what and where, you can provide that information. So be mindful of that. So the other is tele-rotation value. You talked about it, and we can talk about it in the future. I think we shouldn't go back to that one. If you don't get hands-on experience, tele-rotation, is it important? So I think you talked about it a little bit. If you want to add something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it may be one of those things that you can use as an experience on your application. So maybe it gave you some insight as to how things are done in this country. It depends on how much interaction, if you have interaction with patients. There are some tele-rotations. Like I have one tele-rotation that I actually recommend for people that are interested in doing pathology, because the individuals who have taken that tele-rotation with this particular pathologist, it's been a great rotation for them. I haven't heard anybody that didn't rave about it. So I think there's some exceptions. So I don't think that it's potentially not valuable, but how valuable it is, I think, it's one small factor, and it can be used on your application as an experience if you feel like after doing that you actually have something that it was really valuable to you.
And the other question, how many programs should we apply? Very difficult question.
I mean, I don't know that there's any answer to that question, but here's what I will tell you is, even though and it varies in specialties, how many program signals you can send, right? If you make application and you only apply to 20 programs, let's say, or only apply to 40 programs, you're really putting yourself at a great disadvantage, because it's not just the programs. I mean, you're much, much more likely to get an interview at the people where you sent a program signal. We didn't talk about that, but let's say you send a program signal in medicine last year. If you sent a program signal, you got 7 program signals last year. You were more than 4 times more likely to get an interview if you tagged that program. You had a 28% chance of getting an interview at a program that you tagged as something that you were interested last year for internal medicine. Okay. So, but there were many people who, when I would interview them, they would get, one interview at a program that they had listed as a program signal, and they got an interview where they totally unexpected. They looked at their application, they liked it, they invited them for an interview. So I can't give you a number. All I can say is that, I'm not telling you to apply to 200 programs, and I know it's expensive, but the more that you can apply to within a reasonable number, like I would kind of tell people, don't bother to apply to less than 80 or 100 programs. I really think, that's a minimum number of programs to apply to.
Yeah, so apply widely. I think what we can say is try to apply widely. So when we apply for 100 programs, it costs you more compared to applying to 50 programs. Applying to 100 programs, applying to 200 programs will cost you more than applying to 100 programs. Just like, look at your budget. If you can afford it, try to go ahead and apply for a little bit more number of places, and that kind of increases your chance of getting interviewed and matched. That's what we can say. And Hammer is saying, greetings, I am G from Eritrea, neighboring country. Looking forward to working with Dr. Parker. So thank you so much. Welcome aboard. Probably maybe one of the guys would be getting the takeaway.
I worked with someone last year from Eritrea, and she got a pre-match. So
excellent. Yeah. That's beautiful. So next, what about dual applications? I think that means applying for internal medicine and gynae, applying for internal medicine and neurology, things like that. So how successful are they, especially with regards to preparing a CV that will be submitted to 2 different programs? I think this is important, and they have to be careful.
I don't know, many people apply to dual programs. Okay, it's very common for people in internal medicine to apply to some family medicine programs. It's common for people to apply, let's say, for medicine and neurology, like they have a backup. They really want neurology, but they're willing to do medicine, etc. It does present difficulties for a couple of reasons. Number one, you really have to have 2 personal statements. Okay, so you be prepared to write 2 personal statements. The application itself, it's probably okay. You can create an ERIS application that is going to be helpful for multiple programs. But if you're looking at surgery and medicine, there may be some different flavors there, and it may be a little bit harder to do that. But I think the ERIS application isn't as hard as 2 things. Number one, you have to have 2 personal statements, and you have to be convinced. And so when you go to one interview, you can't get confused. You have to sort of know your identity when you're in one interview versus the other one, because people make mistakes in their interviews and then they do themselves. The second thing is you have to get a bunch of different letters. So now, instead of just getting 4 letters, let's say you're applying internal medicine, 2 letters from internal medicine, maybe you had 1 from, I don't know, OBGYN because they knew you well in that service, and then maybe 1 from somebody that you did research with or whatever. Now you may have to get 6, 7, 8 letters, especially if those are very, very different specialties. And that's really hard. It's hard to get just the 4 letters, just like we were talking. You have to give people advance notice and all of that. So the letters can sort of be the restricting thing with applying to multiple different programs. I had a guy the other day, I swear, and he wasn't Ethiopian, okay, thank God. But he told me, he told me he wanted to apply to these 5 specialties, 5. And I said, listen, I talked to him, and it was a crazy interview. And I said, this is too chaotic for me. Like, you have to figure out who you are and what you want. we can't be applying to 5 specialties. Like, it was clear he just wanted a position in this country, but that's not going to get you a position in the country. I mean, right? That's not a strategy that's going to work. You have to want to be an internist, or want to be a surgeon, or want to be an obstetrician, or whatever it is. You have to have some affinity, not just I want to come to America so I can make more money. That's going to not serve you well.
So I'm laughing because, like, I'm thinking about applying for 5 different specialties.
I mean,
he wants everything. He wants surgery. He wants family medicine. He wants internal medicine. That's not a good strategy. I don't think so. Probably they are trying to maximize their matching, but like, but you should be determined to go to a certain specialty and, like, put all extra effort into making it happen, rather than, like, while you are trying to be a master of everything, you'll end up being a master of nothing. There is this good saying, right? So be careful, guys. Don't be overstretched. So can I apply for a match while waiting for a marriage IR1 visa waiting list in Ethiopia? This is for a lawyer, I guess, and your wife or your husband.
I have no idea. I have no idea, but the visa thing is definitely something that is difficult to navigate, and you need to figure that out.
Yeah, so ask your lawyer. So I graduated 7 years ago. How can this affect my application? What should I do to compensate that? And thank you, FSH and Dr. Parker. You kind of addressed this, but, like, if you want to say a few things, you can do.
Well, I assume that since your graduation 7 years ago, you've been doing things. You haven't been sitting at home watching TV or whatever, So there's things that you've done 7 years ago, since from 7 years till now, and you need to highlight those things, and you need to, hopefully those things have some connection with medicine, and you need to figure out how to demonstrate that those are strengths. That's quite simply that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. That's a very important point. And Milkesa said, does not having a research experience affect probability of matching? We talked about it. And the other, what about taking step 3 before application? Will it increase interview number or the probability of matching?
Okay, I don't know that there's data on this, but I can tell you there is a lot of stuff, and I haven't really talked about this, but I sort of monitor in some groups that I'm on. I can't post on them because I'm not allowed to post on them, in the sense that I'm not allowed to sell services on them. But I see the most amazing advice, and I mean amazing because it's just wrong. I think it's it's unhelpful advice that people give each other about all sorts of things, including things like step 3. So step 3. So there's a couple things that I can tell you about step 3. Step 3 is necessary if you are even thinking about doing a transitional. If you're going to apply for a transitional program, you have to have step 3, because the transitional programs, you're required to complete step 3 during the course of that program year. It's a 1 year, rotating kind of experience. And you have to have step 3 done, and they really only are going to look at international candidates, and it's very hard to get into. But if they're going to look at you as an IMG, you have to have step 3 done before you apply. So that's number 1. Number 2, I don't know that there's any data. I've never seen it because it's not part of what most people will say step 3 is not important. If you look at the vast amount of data about it, it will say we don't care about step 3. Now, I think that's correct, and it's not. If you fail step 3, that is not good. And so, people who did marginally on step 2, I don't really encourage them to take step 3 unless they really think that by dint of study and all of that they can get a good score on step 3. I mean, prepare for it, work on it, see if you think you're ready to take it, but don't take it if you don't think you're going to do well, because if you fail it, or you get a just above passing score, all you've really done is confirm for the program director that you're not a good test taker. And let me tell you something. The latest data, there's always more and more data about this. But if you don't do well on your step 2, especially like in medicine for sure, there was just a big study that came out. It demonstrated that you are less likely, that it correlated with your chances of passing your American Board of Internal Medicine exam, okay? And what program directors care, that we care that the graduates in our program pass their ABIM exam. So some of this whole process is trying to cull a group of individuals who, as we said, we want to see professionalism. We know that that's a key thing, but we also want to know that the people are going to be able to do well academically and pass their certification exams at the end. And so, to my point, if you haven't done particularly well in your step 2, and then you take step 3 and you don't do well in it, it confirms for them the fact that maybe that's a risk for them to take that they're not going to want to take. If you can blow them out of the water, and I just don't see this happening. I see very few people that have excellent step 3 scores. I think most of the time because we say it's just something that you need to, you need to get over and just get it done. And that's different. That's probably true. If you're in residency and you take your step 3, then it's just who cares what score you get in a way. It may have some implication for fellowship, but it really doesn't matter that much. But on the application side, if you're applying and you don't do well on step 3, I don't think it's good for your application. So I have counseled some people to take it and some people not to take it. There is a lot of information out there on the web where some people say, oh my God, if you get step 3, it dramatically increases your chances of getting interviews. And I don't, if there's valid data that supports that, I haven't seen it.
I think it's like, the preference would be dependent on the programs where you are applying, because I know one place where they ask you, especially if you are an old graduate, more than 5 years, they just want to make sure that you have taken a step 3 before you apply to them. I know people in that program. That's why I'm saying this, because they had a bad experience. That's what I heard, because one of the candidates, after they joined their program, failed, couldn't pass a step 3, and that person had to be dismissed from their program. So that was a trauma. So they developed PTSD. So the program director wants you to take step 3, especially if you are an old graduate and if you are an average test taker. So if you didn't convince them, in my time, it was a step 1, step 2. If you have scored well in step 1 and step 2, then they don't doubt you. You would do well in step 3. So they didn't care. But for those people with average scores, they were kind of skeptical, and they would ask you, do you have step 3? But those are like, few spots here and there. So I don't think step 3 is universally needed. So a lot of questions are pouring. Dr. Parker, stay. So I mean, I don't want to ignore these questions because majority of people waited for it. But we will conclude our discussion maybe in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So we'll try to wrap it up. And you should understand this is not going to be the end of our discussion. We'll have a series of discussions on various issues. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or reach out to Dr. Parker. Give us topics which you want us to highlight further. So I have been discussing with Dr. Parker. We will definitely talk about letter of recommendations, US clinical experience, red flags, things like that with a greater extent, so that we can address every possible question you can pose. Because one question which is pertinent to me may not be pertinent to the other candidate. So we'll be focusing on those issues. So I'll try to really go by most of these questions real quick. So somebody said, Dr. Brahanu, Jim, this is my brother, Dr. Parker. We went to medical school together. He's my best friend. We were in the same dormitory. He has achieved a lot. He has done a lot. He went to Harvard. Now he's at the University of Michigan doing PhD. And I'm pushing him hard to apply for residency. So we'll talk about him further in private. So he said, related to publications, how about graduate degrees? How do you strengthen your application? So in his case, he has MPH in Harvard, and he has PhD at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So I think you can highlight on those issues.
Well, I mean, I think that those are going to strengthen your application. It depends where you're applying, right? I mean, some programs aren't going to care that much, and others that are more competitive university programs are potentially going to care more about that. The other thing that getting an MPH or doing this kind of work in this country, coming in and taking one of those research positions does for you is it gives you publications and it gives you connections. And so what I say about these MPH degrees is that it's not just the MPH degree of itself, because if you actually look at the data, it doesn't really look like the MPH degree by itself helps you that much. it may be dependent on where you go, but let's just say a generic MPH degree is not that valuable. But what is valuable are the other things that are attached to that MPH, the publications you get, the research experience, the connections. Sometimes you come and it opens doors for you because somebody knows someone else, and they'll hand your application to someone else because they say, I've worked with this person. They have great integrity. They're a wonderful candidate. I don't know them clinically, but look at their application. Or maybe if you're in this country doing something, it will open doors for you for a clinical rotation somewhere. So my take is that it's more about the sort of the whole picture of what an MPH does for you, rather than the actual 3 letters or 2 letters or whatever it is that come after your name, which is, I think, the case with all of us, right? I mean, it's what we do with those degrees.
Yeah, most people have asked about that question. Actually, like there is an exodus, Dr. Parker, to the US. Many people are applying. The young generation is applying to MPH programs. They are matching to John Hopkins. Like last year, we had like about 10 candidates in John Hopkins, Dr. Parker. That's remarkable. And a couple of folks in Harvard and other high-end places. And for example, Kiribati, right? So he got accepted to 8 top-notch universities, but he kindly declined because he wanted to focus on his studies. So there is a great exodus. So those people who are moving to the US with MPH degrees, you should know that, during that stay, work hard, get good letter of recommendations, create connections, interact with people that you are interested to pursue your career as an internist or as a surgeon. So try to create your own opportunities in that process. So wherever you are staying for 1 year or 2 years, work hard. More than the degree, the connection you create would take you a long way, I believe. And I hope, Dr. Parker, you agree with me on that, right? Okay, so MPH, we talked about it. Maximum reapplication limit. There is nothing called maximum reapplication limit. As far as you are not tired and you don't want to give up, you can continue. Related to publications, how about graduate degree? How can you use? I think we already answered that one. Comprehensive. This is just thanking us. How can you tell us how we can get better chances of externship observership? And how many are required? Probably Miriam joined us late, so you can listen to this chat again. Dr. Parker already has addressed this issue. And Kadda said, thank you, I really appreciate. Okay, that's an appreciation. Thank you so much for that. Another appreciation. Okay, the same question repeating. So could you please tell us how we can contact you? Looking forward to working with you. That is Waina Mangstef, probably from Ethiopia. So we are going to talk about it in a few minutes. Just this is the end of it. This is the end of the questions I get from online. But a couple of other people have asked it on LinkedIn Live. So let me see. I don't want to miss anybody's question. So I think we have addressed the majority of the questions. So you can say some final words, Dr. Parker, just to conclude our discussion, our today's discussion, and whatever generosity you have been thinking, we can also make it public right now, and we go from there. How can people reach out to you? How can they sign up to your program? And for a few initially for first few candidates who are signing up, I think you have been thinking about giving some giveaways and all that. So let's talk about that, and you can conclude.
So I don't know whether or not we should put something in chat or what, so that they have some of the information. Should I do that? We can speak it, but anyway, comments. So just thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's been really lovely just to have this time to chat with you and to hopefully provide you with, some answers to questions that you have. It's always nice when you end up just interacting with, with the individuals who are online. And you can see a lot of the questions come up time and time again. But I'm looking forward actually to some more chats with you where we can really focus in on just specific things, because we really didn't have that kind of opportunity here. And I really tried to give you as much as a broad brushstroke about some of the things that I think are important in the application process. So, you can reach me at my company, which is called imgspecialist.com. So it's just one word, imgspecialist.com. And when you get on that website, it will give you, you can fill out the contact sheet and you can let me know. That's also the place when you get onto my website where you can look to see whether or not there's any services that you want to purchase. And the only thing I would say to you is a couple things. Look at the, it was mentioned, look at the testimonials that are on there. I think now I have something like 118 testimonials, read them. Well, those are the individuals that got matched, but there's also a whole section of just testimonials about everybody who worked with me that might be helpful. Look at the people who matched. You probably know some of them. I would bet you that some of you know some of those individuals. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, and I hope that you guys will all look at, you'll make a connection with me on LinkedIn. But on LinkedIn, I have some blogs and I have just recently actually published two discussions about red flags, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 was about what is a red flag and some data, the statistics about red flags. And then part 2 was how do you circumvent red flags? So I would invite you to read those things because I think, I put a lot of effort into it and I think they would be helpful for you. What else can I tell you? I think that's really it about my website. There are, different services there. We've already talked about that. And I wanted to let you know that, the packages that I have, as I said, I think probably the most popular thing is the basic package, which is the 3 services that I mentioned, the interview, ERIS, application review, and personal statement review, and which is already 20% discounted, but I'd like to give, 10 people that are the first individuals who are interested an additional 10% off from that by using a code when they if they purchase that service. And so I'll just put it in the chat because really what you're going to do is you're going to just put 10% off when you purchase I haven't actually activated it yet, but if you put 10% off, just like this, in the in the discount, there's a discount coupon and you just put 10% off, it will automatically take 10% off. And I'll honor that for the first 10 people that are interested for a basic or a comprehensive premium package. But I suspect that many people are gonna, if they're able to and desire it, they'll end up with some basic services. So that's really it. I don't have anything more to say. Just thank y'all for all your effort and for hanging in there. As many of you who are still here, trying to figure out obviously how to improve things for yourself so that you can be in this country next year.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. Somebody was asking, how important is it to have somebody, a connection in a program to increases our chance of getting an interview and in-depth matchings? They were asking about that question. You can say something about it. And I have already put it in the chat, 10% off. This is the way you do it, right? Did I do it right? Do you see my comment in the comment thread? I think you did it in the private comment section. So go to the general public. So you would be able to see all
exactly, just like that. I just have to, I have to go into my system and put it in. So it's not, like I said, it's not, I didn't even look at this. I was just looking at the private chat. I could have looked at any of this. Okay.
Can you scroll down? So I displayed them until now, but a lot of comment, a lot of appreciation and everything. Yeah. This is an honor for me, Dr. Parker, to have you here. I remember, how important it was for me to come to your office. And now I have the privilege of talking to you and working with you. It's a big honor, to be honest with you. And I really appreciate the time and the effort you took to sit with me for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's a lot of time investment. And you shared a very vast experience. I wish I had this information 6 years ago or 7 years ago before I moved to the US. So it's a big privilege, guys. Don't take this session lightly. And Dr. Parker has been doing a lot of efforts to help everybody, especially Ethiopian candidates. I have to admit that. especially working with it NRMP, with Hakim Kirubel and everything. And I would like to appreciate my colleagues. I would like to appreciate my colleagues in it NRMP because they have done a lot of job. They have done a lot of work to help, applicants coming here. I would like to appreciate my colleagues in People to People. I don't think you know them. I will introduce you to that team as well. People to People is organized by very senior, highly trained specialists here, but every year they run a lot of sessions to help candidates. And I would like also to appreciate and thank Hakim Kirovel. He's a junior to me. He's my little brother right now. I never met him in person, but I feel like I know him very well. So he has done a lot of things to help people get an opportunity overseas, not only USMLE, everywhere, from Africa to Europe, to Australia, to the US, Canada, you name it. He has done a lot of resources. So thank you so much, Kirobel, and everybody who is trying to help, the new generation coming here. And we are trying to create opportunities. Like I tried to say last time, I am not advertising Dr. Parker. I'm trying to create an opportunity for you guys, for a resource to be available for you at your disposal so that you can successfully match. See it positively. Don't be suspicious. There is nothing. And like I said, Dr. Parker is not making money, to be honest with you. Look at the package. For that, I'm not going to do this. I have to be honest with you. It's because she's doing it because she's passionate, let alone working with all this extensive application process. We know how it is tiresome to do your own application, let alone mentor and guide many applicants. So honestly, we are trying to create an opportunity for you to successfully match. See it that way. Save money, try your best, mobilize resources from family, friends, brothers, sisters living overseas. They should help you today, and you'll help them tomorrow, okay? If they need help. If they don't, they don't. So thank you, Dr. Parker. 10% off for 10 people on top of the 20% discount. And the other thing is, you mentioned to me, let me highlight that. So if somebody decides to purchase only one package, let's say only to work with you only on personal statement, or somebody is interested to work only on the application and they don't want you to work with them on letter of recommendation review or blah blah. So if that happens, let's say somebody signs up, let's say I signed up for letter of recommendation or I signed up for personal statement, and I may end up realizing how important your service is. And if I decide to go back to the package, I think you would accommodate that, right? Instead of charging them for individual services, maybe for somebody who wants to convert to a package, you still give them the package price. Is that what it is?
Sure. I think that's completely fair. I've had some people who have done that, and I've extended that generosity to them so far.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Thank you so much. It's an honor for me. This is not the end of it. We will do some other sessions in the coming until the match is out and official, which is going to be in March. So we'll continue doing this. Stay tuned. Support us by coming, support us by participating, support us by sharing. That's very important. Don't use these services only for yourself. Share it with your friends and all that. So this way, only this way, we can change this wallet for a better. Thank you, Dr. Parker. After you go, I will say a few words in Amharic to my Ethiopian friends, brothers, and sisters. And I appreciate your time. Have a blessed day.
Okay, so I just leave, right? How do I do that?
I will take care of it. I will take care of it.
Okay.
and I will call you after I'm done. So
Okay. All right, very good.
Bye bye. All right. Have a blessed day, Dr. Parker. Thank you so much for international candidates. This session is not meant only for Ethiopians. You have to realize that this information is valid and valuable for every person from across the world. And I know for a fact that Dr. Parker also works with US IMGs who are doing their medical training in Caribbean countries. So, the service is valid for everybody. So feel comfortable to reach out to me, even if you are not Ethiopian. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm not going to work with you. No, that's not going to be the case. So Dr. Parker is also here for everybody. So feel free to contact me. Feel free to contact Dr. Parker. I hope this works with you, works for you. And I hope everybody matches the coming season. እንግዲህ ቅዱሳን ላለፉት 2 ሰዓት ከ20 ራሴን ቶርቸር አድርጌያለሁ በእንግሊዘኛ። አይ ነው በአማርኛ ናንስቶፕ ማውራት እችላለሁ። አዚ ነው እንግሊዘኛ እንግዲህ ደግሞ ፎርማል ሆኖ ስታወሩ ምናምን የራሱ ቻሌንጅ አለው። ሁሌም ጆክ አደርጋለሁ ሜዲካል ስኩልም I don't want to torture myself in English ግን ያው ኢንፎርማቲቭ ስለሆነና ከዶክተር ፓርከር ጋር ይሄን ማድረግ የሚችለው በዚህ መልኩ ብቻ ስለሆነ ይሄን አድርገናል። ግን we had a very beautiful discussion እንዳለን አምናለሁ። እናንተም አትጥፉ ከችበሉ ሰፖርት መደራረግ አለብን። እኔ ይሄን የማደርገው እናንተ ነገ አልፎላችሁ የምታስቡት ደረጃ ላይ ደርሳችሁ ነገ እኔን እንዴት እንደምታግዙኝ አላቅም። to be honest with you ሪስፖንሲቢሊቲ አለብኝ ብዬ ስለማምን ነው። በኔ ካሪየር ፓዝ ውስጥ በር የከፈቱም ሰዎች ነበሩ፣ በር የዘጉም ሰዎች አሉ። እውነት ለመናገር በር የከፈቱልኝን ሰዎች ሁሌ ሳመሰግን ትሰማላችሁ። በር የዘጉብኝን ሰዎች ግን አንድ ቀንም ስማቸውን ሳነሳ ሰምታችሁ አታውቁም። ምክንያቱም ያንን መልስ መመለስ ያለብኝ እኔ በር በመክፈት ነው ብዬ ስለማመን ነው። በር የዘጉብኝ ሰዎች ዛሬ ቁጭ ብለው ያዳምጡኛል እርግጠኛ ነኝ። ከኔ የሚማሩት በር ቢዘጉም ፈቃደ ስላሴን እንዳላቆሙት ከጎሉ አንደኛ ሪያላይዝ ያደርጋሉ። ሁለተኛ በር በመዝጋታቸው የኔን ወንድምነት የኔን ክሎዝነት ያሳጣቸው ይሆናል እንጂ እንደማይጠቅማቸው እና በር በመዝጋት ደግሞ የትም መደረስ እንደማይችል ነውና እኔ ነገ ጠዋት እናንተ ደርማቶሎጂስት ብትሆኑ፣ ኦፍታልሞሎጂስት ብትሆኑ፣ ሰርጅን ብትሆኑ፣ ጋይናኮሎጂስት ብትሆኑ በዛ ስፔሻሊቲ ሰው ሲፈልግ የምመጣባችሁ በራችሁን ማንኳኳ ሰዎች ነው እንጂ የምትሆኑት ትሬት አትሆኑም። እንዴ ፈቃደ ብላችሁ አክብራችሁ ማለት ነው። that is what is happening። አሁን ያስተማርኳቸው ልጆች ከሀገር ከወጣው 8 ዓመት ሆኖኛል። ግን ደውዬ ባካችሁ ስል በር ይከፈታል። እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን። በዛ አይነት መንገድ ከተማሪዎች ጋር ግንኙነት ስለነበረ ማለት ነውና ምናልባት አሁን ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ሆናችሁ አካዳሚክ ኢንስቲትዩሽን ውስጥ የምታስተምሩ ሰዎች እየሰማችሁ ከሆነ በር የምትዘጓቱኑ በር ክፈቱ። ውጭ ሀገር ያላችሁ ሰዎችም ከሆናችሁ ደግሞ ወንድሞቻችሁ ታናናሾቻችሁ ላይ በር አትዝጉ፣ በር ክፈቱ። ኦፖርቹኒቲ እንስጥ ማለት ነው። በምንችለው እንረዳችኋለን። ቅድም እንዳልኩት ያው ብዙ ሰው ኮንታክት ያደርገኛል። በተለይ ደግሞ ሌተር ኦፍ ሪኮሜንዴሽን ጻፍልን አጻፍልን ነው። ካላወቅኳችሁ አትጠይቁኝ በእናታችሁ። ለምን መሰላችሁ? ምክንያቱም በጣም የኔን ሪፑቴሽን ሀርት ያደርጋል። እናንተን የሚጠቅም ሌተር አልጽፍላችሁም፣ ትርጉም የለውም ማለት ነው እና ትክክልም አይደለም። ያው ማጭበርበርም ነው ማለት ነው። ውሸት የማታውቁትን ሰው አውቀዋለሁ ብላችሁ መጻፍ ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ከክፋት አይደለም። ግን ሌተር ሪኮሜንዴሽን ፈቃደ ስላሴ ባይጽፍላችሁም በሌላ መንገድ እረዳችኋለሁ። በዚህ አይነት መንገድ ሰው በማገናኘት ዳይሬክሽን በመስጠት የሚጠቅማችሁን ነገር ኢንሳይት በመክፈት ማለት ነው እና ይሄንን ማይንድፉል እንድትሆኑ ፈልጋለሁ። በተረፈ እግዚአብሔር ለእናንተ የፈቀደውና ያዘጋጀው ነገር ወደ እናንተ መምጣቱ አይቀርም። ይመጣል። ቢሊቭ ሚ ይዘገይ ይሆናል። ሜቢ 2025 አይመጣ ይሆናል። 2026 27 እግዚአብሔር በፈቀደው ሰዓት ባሰበው ሰዓት ከች ይላል። ይሄን አትጠራጠሩ። ደግሞ ለእናንተ ያላለው ከሆነ አልሆነም። አሁን ከትናንት ወዲያ አንድ ልጅ ከአፍሪካ ሀገር የሚሰራ ልጅ አገሩን አልጠቅስም ምን ብሎ ጻፈልኝ። ስፔሻሊስት ነው፣ እንደዚህ አይነት ሀገር እየሰራው ነው እና የኔ እቅድ ገንዘብ ሴቭ አድርጎ ኢትዮጵያ ገብቶ በተማርኩት ክሊኒክ መክፈት ነበር። አሁን ግን ሰውን ሁሉ ሳየው ዩኤስኤምኤል እየተፈተነ ነው ብሎ እንዴት ላርግ አለኝ። ከዛ የጻፍኩለት አንድ ነገር ነው። አንደኛ ሊስን ቱ ዩር ሃርት፣ ልብህን አዳምጥ። ሁለተኛ ደግሞ ፎሎ ዩር ድሪም፣ ፓሽንህን ተከተል እንጂ ክራውድ ተከትለ አብረ የምትነጉዳተን። ይሄንን ያልኩት ሌላ ምንም አላልኩም። ምክንያቱም አሜሪካ መጥቶ መኖር ለሁሉ የሚስማማ ላይሆን ይችላል። ለአንዳንዱ ሰው ሚዝሪ ሊሆንበት ይችላል፣ ለአንዳንዱ ደግሞ ሄቨን ሊሆንለት ይችላልና ለፈቃደ ስላሴ የሆነ ኦኬ እዛ የሚሰራውን ስራ መጥቶ እዚህ ስለመጣ I have to do it የሚል ኮሚትመንት ውስጥ ራሳችሁን አትክተቱ እና ዘ አልኬሚስትን ካነበባችሁት ትሬዠር አንዳንዴ እዛው አጠገብህ ሊሆን ይችላል ማለት ነው። ያንተ መክሊት ያንተ ሀብት አጠገብህ ሊሆን ይችላል። አይን መክፈት ነው እና አንዳንድ ጊዜ በጣም ሁሉም ዩኤስኤምኤል አፕላይ ስላደረገ እንትን አትረበሹ ማለት ነው። if you are doing well somewhere በቃ stick to it እና listen to your heart። ለኔና ለቤተሰቤ የተሻለው የቱ ነው የሚለው ነው እንጂ ለፈቃደ የሰራውን እኔም ማድረግ አለብኝ በሚል አትንቀሳቀሱ ማለት ነው። ማቹሪቲ እዚህ ላይ ያስፈልጋል። በጣም ነው የምወዳችሁ፣ ሁላችሁንም የማስብላችሁ። እግዚአብሔር ደግሞ ይርዳችሁ። የመነኑ እና እግዚአብሔር ይረዳችኋል። በእምነት ተንቀሳቀሱ። be confident, you are amazing, you can do it, you can be successful። ስለዚህ ከዶክተር ፓርከር ጋር ደግሞ በእውነት ነው የምነግራችሁ፣ በእውነት ከሷ ፊት ማለት ስላልፈለኩ ነው። በጣም ደግ ሰው ናት። በጣም ደግ ሰው ናት እና እስቲ ኢንካውንተር ካላችሁ በኋላ ከዋሻው ያኔ ተታዘቡኛላችሁ። በጣም ደግ ሰው ናት። በጣም ጥሩ ሰው ናት። ኢትዮጵያውያንን እጅግ በጣም ያለንን ኳሊቲ ታውቃለች። ሜዲካል ስኩሎቻችን እንዴት አይነት አድርገው እንዳስተማሩን በደንብ ታውቃለች። ሺ ቢሊቭስ ኢን አስ። ስለዚህ ሺ ኢዝ ሬዲ ቱ ሄልፕ ዩ ዩዝ ኦፖርቹኒቲ። በጣም ተጠቀሙበት። ላይክ ዩ ኖ እንደ ፕሮሞሽን ፈቃደ ስላሴ ፓርትነርሺፕ ምናምን ያለ ይመስሎ የሚሰማው ሰው ካለ ኢትስ ዩር ሎስ ኢትስ ኖት ማይን። እና ያንን እናድርግ። እግዚአብሔር ከሁላችንም ጋር ይሁን። እቅዳችሁ ሁሉ ይሳካላችሁ። ማች አርካችሁ በቃ ማሽ እኮ አረኩኝ ደስ ብሎኛል ደስ ይበልህ ብላችሁ እንደምትጽፉልኝ ተስፋ አደርጋለሁ። ከሁላችንም ጋር እግዚአብሔር ይርዳን። በቃ እንግዲህ የዛሬውን ፕሮግራም እዚህ እንጨርሳለን። እኔም ደግሞ ነገ ስራ መጀመር እንዲህ ትንሽ ፈታ ልበል አይደል? ፈታ ማለት አይገባኝም። እግዚአብሔር ከሁላችንም ጋር ይሁን። እግዚአብሔር ይርዳችሁ። ሐሳባችሁ ሁሉ ይሳካ። ፈቃደ ስላሴ ነኝ። ባይ ባይ። በሌላ ፕሮግራም እንገናኛለን። this is not going to be the last። እንዳልኳችሁ አንድ ቶፒክ ብቻ ፒክ እያደረግን ይዘን እንመጣለን። ስለዚህ አናውንስመንቱን ስታዩ ሪፖስት it makes a lot of difference. Bye bye. Have a great day.